There's one simple trick that has the potential to transform the way your plants grow.
It's something that I've only recently thought of, and I can't understand why no one else is talking about it. We're talking thicker stems, shorter trunks, and a much sturdier plant that doesn't want to keel over every couple of minutes. Plus, it's got tons of other benefits too.
But there is a right way and a wrong way to implement it, so don't rush off and do it as soon as I spill the beans. Now, what's the one thing that outside plants in the wild or garden have that indoor ones don't? It's something that greatly benefits them and makes them much stronger and healthier over the long run that indoor plants just don't have the luxury of. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it.
If you thought rain, then close, but no cigar, my plant friend. But I do like the way you're thinking. If we wanted to, we could harvest rainwater and give them to our plants, no probs.
What we're actually talking about here is wind. Yep. A fresh breeze tickling the stems and leaves of our beloved plants.
Sounds absolutely bizarre, I know, but hear me out.
I know we tend to think of them like this, but plants aren't just passive decorations. They're living little beings always reacting to what's going on around them, way more than we usually realise.
In the great outdoors, they're exposed to all sorts of elements. Sun, rain, temperature shifts, especially in my climate, the occasional pigeon attack, but perhaps most importantly, wind.
Now, to us, a bit of breeze might feel like just air moving around, but to a plant, it's a workout. Every time the wind nudges a stem or ruffles a leaf, the plant responds by thickening his tissues and reinforcing his structure. He's not doing it for fun, he's doing it to survive. Because if he doesn't, he'll snap or fall over the next time a gust comes through.
This response even has a fancy name. Now, bear with me on this. Phygmomorphogenesis, I think. It took me about 15 minutes to practice saying that, and I still think I got it wrong. All it means is that plants change their shape based on touch or movement, and wind is the main way that happens in nature.
So what does all this have to do with houseplants? Well, everything. Because indoors, plants live in a weird little vacuum. Not literally, of course, they're not floating around in zero gravity, but you get the idea.
There's no wind, there's no movement, nothing brushing past them. Most of them are just sat there in a cosy little bubble of still air, staring at the same four walls week after week.
And while that sounds like the dream, it's actually too comfortable. They don't have to adapt, they don't have to toughen up, so they don't. You end up with plants that grow a bit lanky and top heavy with stems that aren't quite up to the job of supporting themselves properly. It's not that they're unhealthy, but just that they're not as sturdy as they could be. They've never had to toughen up.
Now, I'm not saying that every indoor plant is weak and feeble, but they could be stronger, a bit more compact, a bit more self-reliant. And wind stress, done properly, can really help with that. There's one plant in particular that benefits massively from this little trick, and I'll show you him in a jiffy.
Now, seedlings are especially vulnerable. You'll often see people start seeds indoors and then panic when the stems start flopping over when they pop them outside.
They might blame the light or the compost or the watering schedule, and yeah, those things matter, but the lack of movement is a big factor too. A seedling grown in complete stillness just doesn't know how to stand on his own 2 feet.
And it's not just about strength either. Still air is also a breeding ground for trouble. Stagnant conditions around the leaves and soil create the perfect environment for pests like fungus gnats or diseases like powdery mildew. Outdoor plants, on the other hand, get the occasional breeze that dries the leaves off, knocks insects around and keeps things from going stale.
So when you bring a plant indoors, you're basically cutting it off from all that. You're putting it in a static little box where the air never moves and nothing ever changes unless you make it. And that's where a bit of controlled wind can make a huge difference. You're reintroducing one of the key forces plants evolved with. You're giving them a challenge to rise to, and they will.
So what's that one plant that will benefit most from a bit of wind stress? Well, the fiddle-leaf fig. You probably got one at home, right? Now mine's growing fairly well. I mean, he's got a stem and some leaves and he's not hunched over like someone's tickling his belly, but if you take a closer look, you'll notice that his stem is looking a bit thin. The top is getting heavier with every new leaf, and I'm at the point where I'm genuinely wondering how much longer he's going to stay upright.
I really wish I'd known about wind stress sooner, because if I'd started this when he was younger, I reckon he'd have a much sturdier structure by now.
But the good news is that it's not too late. Even now I can start introducing a bit of movement to stimulate stronger growth.
But if you've got a young one, now's the time. A few minutes of air movement each day might be all it takes to stop you having to perform emergency surgery a year from now. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, there is a right way and a wrong way to do this to your plant.
The wrong way is shaking your plant like Tom Cruise in Cocktail.
You might have seen those TikToks or Insta Reels where someone grabs their plant by the stem and gives it a good wobble, like they're trying to wake it up or snap it out of a funk. But please don't do that. It might look funny or satisfying, but it's really not helping your plant.
The idea behind it does make sense in theory. They're trying to stimulate wind, but shaking it isn't the same as a natural gentle breeze. It's more of a sudden jolt.
For many plants, especially the more delicate ones, that kind of movement can cause micro tears in the stems and damage the roots. It's stressful, but not in a good muscle building kind of way. So instead of manhandling your plant like it owes you money, you want to introduce a more natural, controlled source of airflow.
The simplest and best way to introduce wind to your indoor plants is just by opening a window or door and letting a bit of natural breeze drift through the room. I do this whenever I can, especially during the warmer months. If it's a mild day and there's even a hint of a breeze, the doors are open. It helps the plants and it airs out the room nicely, and it just makes the space feel better to be in.
This method is brilliant because the airflow is natural. It's not too strong, it's not constant, and it varies throughout the day just like it would in the outside. And that variability helps the plant respond in a more realistic way.
You're also getting the added bonus of bringing in fresh CO2 for your plants to use during the day and flushing out that stale air that tends to build up indoors. I always notice my plants perk up after a few hours of fresh air, and I reckon it benefits me just as much as them.
Of course, it's not always practical, especially if it's cold or you live in a flat without much airflow, and that's where the next method comes in.
If cracking a window isn't an option, the next best thing is using a fan. An oscillating fan to be exact, one that moves side to side, creating a nice sweeping motion rather than blasting your plants with a constant gale.
The key here is moderation. You don't want your leaves flapping around like they're in a wind tunnel. A good rule of thumb is for the leaves just to get a little tickle from the moving air. Just a gentle rustle now and then is perfect. If the fan's pushing them around like they're trying to take off, then it's probably too strong or too close.
I keep mine on the lowest setting, usually a couple of meters away from the plants, and make sure it's not pointed directly at one plant for too long. And you also don't need it on all day. A couple of hours every now and then is enough to trigger that growth response we're after.
Now, before you throw every window and door in the house open, there are a few things worth keeping in mind, and the main one is pests.
Leaving windows or doors open, especially in the warmer months, can invite some unwelcome guests, namely thrips, whitefly and aphids. These annoying little hitchhikers can sneak in without you even noticing.
This is why I don't leave my windows open all day. I'll open them for a couple of hours, let some fresh air in, give the plants a bit of gentle movement, and then close everything up again. It gives them what they need without giving bugs a permanent invite.
This is where the fan option comes into its own. Because you're controlling the environment, there's far less risk of bringing pests indoors. You get all the benefits of wind stress without playing insect roulette. So when you start introducing all this additional airflow, it's not just the leaves that feel it. Your soil will start drying out faster, and that means you might need to make a few small adjustments to your usual watering routine.
It's especially noticeable in smaller pots or seedlings where even a couple of hours of air movement can leave things feeling much drier by the end of the day. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Better airflow helps prevent things like root rot or fungus gnats, but you do need to keep a closer eye on moisture levels. So I mentioned how plants like the fiddle leaf fig would benefit from this, but there are some plants that you should keep an eye on that might react in a negative way.
Calophyas, ferns, peace lilies and alocasias tend to be tropical understory plants, used to growing in sheltered spots. A fan or cold breeze can potentially lead to brown edges.
So if you've got a mixed plant room, then have a think about who's sitting where. Put the wind-loving plant in the breeze's path and keep the more delicate types tucked out of it. A bit of fall goes a long way to keeping everyone happy.
So how do you know if this is working or not?
Well, don't expect a miracle transformation overnight. This is more of a slow and steady kind of change. The most noticeable benefits tend to show up in young plants or seedlings because they're still developing their structure and have the most to gain.
With regular, gentle airflow, you might start to see slightly thicker stems over time and a bit less of that leggy stretched look. New growth might be a little more compact and upright, and the plant might feel a bit sturdier when you give the stem a little nudge.
This kind of stress is especially useful for seedlings that you plan to move outside later on. Giving them a bit of movement indoors helps prepare them for the real world, so when they finally do feel that first gust of outdoor wind, they're not completely caught off guard.
If you liked this little trick for stronger plants, wait till you see what happened when I change what my spider plant lives in. Honestly, I don't think it would make much difference, but the results were kind of ridiculous. My spider plant has never looked so healthy.
Click here to watch that next, and I'll show you exactly what I did.